Good morning. This is the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals Public Review Session for March 7, 2016. We'll begin with the special order calendar. Decision items. Item number 1, 59544BZ, 30 Central Park South, Manhattan.
Okay, we did receive the community board recommendation. The plans and the statement of facts were submitted, but I actually have to admit I don't know what changed on them. I think it may have just been the dimension, which is, I think one of the dimensions on the plans originally was 50 foot something, and the site is only 50 foot wide. Other than that, I'm not sure what changed. My notes say they were supposed to have submitted a zoning analysis since the last submission had NA applying to all of those zoning questions, so that they didn't do that. Were there other?
Well, I had asked them to clarify the site size, which they did, and it's consistent between the plans and the statement. And then there was a question about the violations that were open, and they're saying they've all been cured. I think there's really only one open from 2009. So it could be, it's just for construction, it could be any one of the users.
Right, so, okay, all right.
I didn't have any other issues.
Okay.
So we're good to go?
Yeah.
Okay. Item number 2, 9708BZ, 84 Sanford Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, Tracy's here, sorry. I'm so used to this touch screen. Slowly. Here we go. Okay. It looks to me like they submitted everything we asked for. The fire department signed off on the sprinklers and fire alarms, and DEP signed off on the noise and interior air quality. We will need, going forward, the applicant to monitor the SSDS and send us regular reports until we can get them enrolled in a program with OER, which we hope will happen as they expand the school, which is in process. And just note that this, as opposed to what they submitted, still shows 6 open ECB violations and penalties owing, and 2 open DOB violations, which must be cleared up shortly. I think that the way to address this is to give them a very short leash, because they have a bad history of compliance. And I'd like to have some conditions, which are regular pickups of the garbage. They sent us a photograph of trash being collected, but I'm not sure what that really demonstrates. Except that the trash was collected that day at night. So regular pickups of trash being kept inside the building until pickup, that they work with DOT to get the school crossing signs and the signage. Did I leave anything out? Okay. Anybody else with it?
Okay, continued hearing items. Item number 3, 52676BZ, 1492 Victory Boulevard, Staten Island.
They want to adjourn this.
Item number 4, 38280BZ, 318 East 91st Street, Manhattan.
Okay. One of the questions we had for this theater/church was about accessibility, and the applicant submitted copy of local law 58 of 87, which, by the way, has long since been superseded by the building code and also by the Americans with Disabilities Act. Those are the standards. The 2014 building code and the ADA is the standard under which this should be analyzed. This is a public accommodation, so subject to the ADA. I believe strongly that stair lifts, at the very least, should be provided on the wide stairs, and a designated wheelchair area created at the seating level, because it's raked seating, so you're stepping into your seat. So that needs to be sort of a little area where the wheelchair just pulls over and replaces a seat. And they could have a seat there when there's not a person in a wheelchair sitting there. They provided a new elevation sheet, but the electronic copy wasn't clear, so that needs to be resubmitted, but you can't submit just one page. It needs to be submitted with the entire set. Actually, I thought that most of what was submitted electronically was barely legible, so that material needs to be resubmitted so that we can see it. It's kept in the record as a digital copy. They also submitted a letter from their sprinkler company stating that the sprinklers are working We don't have a similar letter about the fire alarm systems. There is a 2009 Fire Department self-certification approval of the fire alarm, so I'd like the fire department to opine on this. They also provided 2008 public assembly drawings for 360 persons, but it's not signed, it's not perforated by the Department of Buildings, so I can't tell if it was approved. I do see, however, on BIS that there is a PA permit that was issued in 2013 for 360 persons, so I have to presume that DOB did review the egress issues for that quantity. I am curious about whether the PA permit or egress is affected by the fact that now the first floor, instead of being a use group 17A contractor's office, is actually used by the church. So you have a greater load on the building and on the egresses. I suspect it's fine because of the size of the exit, but I don't know that. So it seems to me there should be another analysis on it. So my really open issues are ADA access, fire department sign off, and that question about egress. Anybody else? Okay.
Item number 5, 82686BZ through 82886BZ, 26910 and 27010 Grand Central Parkway, Queens.
This is such a difficult application. The submission states that some type of an alarm was put onto the doors that, when triggered, lowers the power of the FM transmitter from 1600 to 800 watts. So if I understand this correctly, and I listen to the radio every morning, if I were to live within the range of that transmitter, every time someone opens the door, my radio reception starts to crackle. I mean, I actually don't understand the viability of this proposal. And I'd also like to know, how does the door have to be held open in order to keep the power low, or does it just step down for a few minutes and then it returns to normal? And how long does it stay lowered? And they said they measured it from the FM radio base station. I'd like to know where that is. The submission states also that a T-Mobile antennae at position number 100 was redirected away from the roof, which leads me to understand that if it's directed towards the roof, if any of these antennae get turned, and that's all it takes, then you up the exposure significantly, because that number 100 spot was very hot. So first of all, I'd like to see photos of these modifications. I don't know what this little, it almost sounds like a jerry-rig, this alarm system. It also states that measurements in the apartments in the floor below were at 5.3% of the maximum permissible exposure limits for the general population. I have a question about what that actually means to people. So for example, on that bulkhead, which is such an incredibly dangerous hotspot, it says that we learned last time that exposure for workers on that top of that bulkhead is limited to 6 minutes at a time, at which point they have to leave for something like 30 minutes before they can come back. So I'd like to know, what does it mean to be exposed to 5% permanently? How does that compare to the rest of us who aren't living underneath the radio antenna? I'm still very concerned that exposure limits skyrocketed since the last approval without any monitoring by the installers or interest in such information by building management. We need to look into them installing a permanent metering system on the roof that tracks exposure levels and the step-down levels that occur when the doors are opened, and sends the data to a monitoring company that sends periodic reports to a watchdog group. This is the only way for BSA to ensure compliance with its conditions. Apparently, even the turning of an antenna can drastically affect the safety of the building. So I'm still extremely nervous about this application. Anybody else? More?
I just had a question about concerning the stairs going to the roof. and whether or not that was still sort of part of their evacuation plan in any way. So I was curious whether or not they were saying that they were going to cordon off the stairs, no one can get to the roof even in an emergency. So, there's a fire on the top 2 floors of the building, and your only way out is to go up and onto the roof. And if they keep those doors permanently closed, or you have to have a key, what does that do? I don't think they really answered that question, whether that was part of the evacuation plan.
Wait a minute, so what I understood was the stairs are free to open because it's an emergency, but the second the door opens, something magical happens and the radio is lowered in terms of its intensity. The radio antenna intensity is lowered.
So every time that door opens,
Your radio
the
crackles.
radio crackles.
Or something.
Is that, okay. I didn't understand that. I thought that they were keeping it closed. And that was my question about the evacuation plan, because all big buildings have evacuation plans, which include evacuating through the roof.
Well, they had said last time that it wasn't part of the evacuation plan, and we asked for their evacuation plan.
And they didn't give it
Which they
to
never
us,
gave it to
right?
us, so I think they're kind of accepting the fact that people may have to evacuate to the roof.
Yes.
So-
But I would
there's
I
a
would still like to
panic
see their
hardware.
evacuation plan. I mean, they should have one. We all
Right.
have one if you live in a big building.
Right.
So.
They never submitted.
I think they should submit that so that we can check it against what they're saying concerning the roof door.
Right.
Regarding the entry system, I had similar questions to what the chair had. I wanted to know how long it takes to reduce the power, and then how can the system be monitored and maintained in reliable condition? Should it have monthly testing, confirmation of adequate operation? And then everything revolves around Bill Davies. And I'm just thinking, what if his phone's not working? What if he's on vacation in Hawaii? What if he's sleeping? It's like, to have everything revolving around one person, that the signal goes to his phone, and then it's up to him
To turn it
to
off.
no, it's not up to him to turn it off. It's up to him to bring the power back up. I think the power going down is automatic. But to send it back up to the typical power, the 1,600 watts, is up to Bill Davies, who's not on the site. So,
Well, with any luck for the residents, he'll be on vacation a lot.
and then in addition, the statement referenced a company called CCM, but the PeerCon report just mentioned CLI and CCI. I wanted to know who, clarify who these different parties are. And they say that they were in compliance for building number 1, and it's, as I mentioned the last time, they were clearly not in compliance with the prior grant.
Right.
Because it just wasn't limited to that one point in terms of the access. And I hope they don't do some ridiculous thing like keep the barricade up around that one point.
Which now they're saying they don't need to do.
Right.
Because it's going to step down when anyone's on the roof. And in addition to which, it's ridiculous because we see that entire wing is a hotspot.
It is.
So,
Yes, but I don't think they intend to put any barricades up except the special signage for building number
Right.
1. I think that they should not be allowed to change anything. They have 74 antenna now and 1 camera, and they're allowed to have 75, but I think they should be limited to whatever is there now with no changes. And if they do have any changes in terms of type of antenna or orientation of antenna, that they should go through a whole testing scenario again.
I would tend to agree with that, because there's so much that you have to do to even increase. There's just so much testing and so many precautions one has to take that they would be,
Well,
they'd
it's-
have to be here all the time.
Yeah, it's just alarming that you can just change the orientation of an antenna and, cause
Exactly.
significant changes
Right,
in the
exactly.
RF
it goes from
exposure.
dangerous to not dangerous
Right.
because you turned it.
And I think there should be a mandatory testing, even if there are no changes at a certain period, maybe annually or semi-annually.
Do they say how they actually physically turn?
Sounds like the guy went up there and went like this.
So anyone might be able to do that?
I don't think
Or is
so.
there some?
I think there are,
I know, it's like, okay. I hear you.
It's everyone's phone.
I think that these are rigid structures that, you would take an intentional, hardware
In other words, one
to
could not just simply go on the roof and just by mistake,
knock
oops,
it.
I knocked it over.
I hope not.
Or like a strong wind would turn it.
So it would be
Really?
good to have that
I don't think so.
information.
No?
I don't
So?
think, these things would not operate properly in terms of communication if they were able to be,
So maybe
moved
they-
by a strong
they could-
wind.
Maybe they could tell us what that operation is, just to make sure that no one's on the roof that just happened to turn it the
But in
wrong
terms
way.
of this whole operation, I think they should have some additional people in addition to Bill Davies.
Yes, yeah. But, and also in terms of this monitoring, I don't think annual monitoring is enough, because frankly, when they're measuring the 5% in the apartment below, I'm taking a guess that they measured that when it was in a step-down position. So if you, and anyway,
Not sure.
if it I don't know, but let's just say it gets more and more intense, it's gonna have an effect on the apartments below too, right? So I think there should be some kind of a system installed that actually monitors it regularly, very regularly, and that the printout or whatever it is something where tenants associate, or property owners association or something receives the reports, because they're the ones who would be concerned about this.
That's right.
Clearly, management isn't concerned. Okay. Very difficult. Okay. That's the next one?
Item number 6, 17392BZ, 220 East 86th Street, Manhattan.
All right, so, all right, with this one, they resubmitted kind of old information saying that they are having trouble getting DOB to allow them to proceed with the fire alarm installation. I think what we really need to be doing is following up with DOB to get them to, just allow them to install under an Alt-1 for conforming use. And so let's just see if we can get that accomplished. So, yeah, so that's just
There
where
was
we are.
nothing, yeah.
Yeah.
Next one. Item number 747-10BZ, 895 Zariga Avenue, the Bronx.
Okay. They did provide, as requested, an analysis of the M1 performance standards, which don't actually address this type of gas storage, and fire department has imposed its own safety standards that the applicant, go ahead.
Right, but in addition to what the fire department has done, which is related to outdoor storage, they have indoor storage, which is not part of the fire department waiver. So I think, and they're saying that it's only for liquids and it's not for gases, but some of these, like cryogenic oxygen, is a liquid, as far as I know, and liquefied petroleum gas is partially a liquid. So maybe I would like the fire department to weigh in on this. There are some standards which are required in the zoning under 42-275, which has to do with an automatic fire extinguishing system and a limitation of the amount of storage. And I don't really think that that's very difficult to comply with. So, but I would like to hear what the fire department has to say.
All right, so then they also submitted landscaping and fencing plans. I think they need to install that equipment, that stuff now. It's perfect planting season as we speak, especially today. The drawings show, on the drawings, they need to add to the site plan where the details are that appear on drawing number BSA 607, because you actually can't figure out what those details are for. With respect to BSA 607, there are 2 detail sections, CCs, and no DD. They also should provide more information on the steel bollard that's to be installed in front of the cylinders. and they should incorporate the fire department conditions. Oh, that's a note to us. We'll incorporate the conditions on the resolution. Anything else? Okay.
New cases, item number 8, 73241, BZ, 100-17 Beach Channel Drive cleaning.
With respect to the drawings, I'd like them to dimension the distance from the dispensers to the property line and to each other. It seems like the opaquing slats along the residential property line should go to the full height of the fence and not stop midway. I didn't really understand that. The sidewalk in front of the property has to be maintained and free of debris. It's really a mess. And there's a I'd like to know what's going on with the fence portion where the supports extend much higher than the chain link. It should be properly trimmed. And there seems to be parking on Beach 100th sidewalk. The site, yeah, go ahead.
I think those are mostly residents of the abutting properties that are parking there. Based on my field observation, what I noticed is somebody was walking from the residential building and it wasn't from the facility.
So the residents think it's okay to park on the sidewalk?
Well, there's not much of a sidewalk, that's another question.
Right.
It's not built, it's
Sort of
kind
like just a gravelly area.
It's a gravel kind of thing, so it's really not a defined sidewalk.
So, but the sidewalk's a responsibility of the retail owner.
It's on his property necessarily.
What, the property, you mean there's the property line, and then you're saying the rest there's another property owner as opposed to the city? Because sidewalk's always the responsibility of the property owner in front. So
Maybe they could just clear up the confines of their property to make sure that it doesn't include that area, because I too was there and I saw cars parked there and it was unclear whether it was actually connected to the property in question.
Yeah,
because it's beyond the fence.
Yeah,
it's beyond their fence line.
One side of the sidewalk is in good, two sides of the sidewalk, it's in good condition. It's only one side, and I'm wondering if it was at all affected by
you're wondering if it's what?
If it was affected by Sandy and if it was rebuilt or not. So I think those are also some questions we would need some clarification on.
Okay. It's unclear where. Right. So, but it's kind of like who's responsible for that sidewalk, really, because it isn't nobody. Also, I'd like them to explain the fire department report that shows a pass on some accounts and violation on others at the same address. It seems like there weren't any matching accounts, so it seemed like there were many different accounts, and I'm not sure exactly how that's designated, what those account numbers refer to. Anybody else?
The fencing on the northeast portion of the site is actually in disrepair. It's like, looks like something might have hit it, so it's kind of folded back and crumpled, so that whole fence probably needs to be replaced. And also the screening in the rear needs to be redone, because that's also in bad shape.
Item number 9, 63654BZ, 9612 Seaview Avenue, the Bronx.
Okay, this one, I note that the community board approved this with a lot of conditions, which I think were the conditions from the last board approval, which is that the premises must be kept clean of debris and graffiti, that all lighting will be pointed away from residential dwellings, that there will be no parking on sidewalks, that there will be no outdoor storage, that all signs shall be maintained in accordance with BSA-approved plans, and that a new certificate of occupancy shall be obtained within 1 year, which was were the conditions of the last BSA grant, and were, well, at least this, with respect to the CO, were not complied with. I'd like to know what, because there is no CO, what open items are there that would prevent its issuance? On the compliance chart, it was a very strange lawyerly response to a compliance chart. Everything was answered upon information and belief. I've actually never seen that done on a compliance chart. The question is, are you parking on the sidewalk? That's a yes or a no question, Your Honor. So that has to be redone and find out the real answers. If you don't know the answers, either do a site visit or have someone else do the compliance report. There are, I noticed there in the photographs anyway, there are many miscellaneous banners and paper signs that need to be removed. I'd like to know whether that little office storage building is used.
It is used, and it does have posters and translucent material that kind of obstructs the view. I think the intent of that was to ensure there is clear line of sight from that booth, which is being obstructed by the posters and all the translucent glass materials, and that needs to be corrected.
And you were talking about the storage.
I was talking about the
Building
storage,
in the
yeah, the
back.
little separate
yeah.
building. That's an
I'm sorry.
office storage building, kind of
Right.
boarded up.
That has some graffiti on it still.
Yeah.
Okay. So is it being, but could you tell if it was being used?
It's supposed to be used as storage in an office. It probably is. It's
Okay.
in decent condition aside from the graffiti that's on it.
Okay.
I was wondering if they could add some plantings to the grassy areas?
Yes.
And some street trees on, I forget what the name of that
St.
street is.
Jude.
Yes, St. Jude.
Yeah, there's
I
plenty
think
of
there's a
landscape area that could be.
pit there, right?
They were supposed to have landscaped that area according to the
Right.
last approval.
Yeah,
and
but
this proposal seems to
it
be
wasn't
for none.
detailed.
None, yeah.
And then
so-
there, along the rear, there's a, it looks like an area where the fence is bent,
Yeah.
near the vacuum or air pump or something. Somebody must have hit it.
Okay. Okay.
Ready?
Yep.
Item number 10, 109279 BZ, 112 Charlton Street, Manhattan.
I note the community board approved this, and I was persuaded by the materials submitted that the transferable development rights had no value in 1979 and 80 at the time of the variance for several reasons. The economy was extremely depressed at the time. There was an unfamiliarity in the marketplace with the TDR transfer mechanism, since the definition of zoning lot that would include a merger by restrictive declaration was just enacted 2 years before, that there was independent ownership of the adjacent properties, that they were small in size and were severely underbuilt at the time. Yep.
I appreciate it. Item number 11, 17393 BZ, 3223 Queens Boulevard, Queens.
Okay. We need the community board recommendation. I didn't find that in the file. They did, in the statement of facts, very belated submission, like the 0-hour submission, which I didn't appreciate. They did mention, discuss the Bella Vista case in terms of, which is necessary, but I think that what they neglected to do is to talk about the Bella Vista case in terms of the B finding that applies to not-for-profits, which is, will the transfer of the 40,000 square feet of development rights affect the programmatic needs of the institution, in some way diminish its ability to pursue its programmatic requirements? They really do need to discuss that. For instance, the building has changed size many times over its history, so will this allow it to continue to expand, for example? That needs to be discussed. Okay, they did provide zoning calculation. Okay, that was my only main question.
I noticed on Acris, though, that I was checking their materials concerning ownership, and I noticed that in 2002, there's a mortgage on Lot 24 for $6 million, and I'm wondering if in our request for owner's approval of these transfers, that they have contacted the mortgage company.
Oh, we don't normally ask for the banks to sign off on
They're
this.
typically,
They're a party in interest.
They're a party in interest, and as a party in interest, don't they have to at least have the notification? I know that previously we had asked that question and just made sure that we had all of the signatures we need for this.
Well, in terms of ultimately, when they merge the zoning lot and they enter into a zoning lot development agreement and the restrictive declaration, all the parties in interest have to sign on to that. So the zoning lot merger won't occur if the bank or lender doesn't sign that. So we don't actually have to, that process will be handled through legal process, and the Department of Buildings won't accept the declaration unless it's been executed by all the parties.
Okay.
So,
I had a question. As I was going through the various approvals that were before the BSA, and as part of the last BSA approval of 2002, it indicated that 61 on-site parking spaces would be provided, whereas as part of the current submission, it indicates there are 23 parking spaces that are there on-site. I would like a clarification, and also it would be helpful for us to get a copy of the plans that were approved by DOB for our file.
okay. Yeah, because they reduced to 43 on-site spaces in 97. And then I don't see that they went any lower than that. It seems like 43 was the smallest number of spaces that was agreed.
The BSA plan that was approved indicated that even though I think it said even though 43 on-site on condition, I think 2001 BSA allowed in large. Right, the plan showed 61 parking.
The plan still showed it even though they reduced it.
Right.
I thought
just
that
I
they
would like a
approved
clarification on
43.
it. It did, but the plan showed 61. So I
Okay.
just want to get a clarification on it as to what did we eventually.
Because there was also a letter of substantial compliance, and maybe we didn't see that plan.
Okay.
Because that reduced the size of the approved enlargement, because then they went to an addition.
Right. And
And
then,
maybe the letter of substantial compliance, when it reduced the size of the addition, went back to a different thing, but they didn't submit that plan to us.
possible, I think the plan, it only talks about the reduction of 10,000 square foot. It didn't mention
Okay,
anything
didn't
in
mention
with
the
regards to
parking count. Okay,
So
so-
it would be helpful to get a clarification.
And I mean, I think, well, it's still their property, so I guess the transfer of development rights doesn't affect the amount of parking that they can provide on the site. They're not affecting the size of their actual tax lot. So,
Right.
okay. Anybody else?
Item number 12, 18909BZ, 3067 Richmond Terrace, Staten Island.
Okay, the community board approved this. I'd like to know whether the applicant obtained a DEP notice to proceed prior to conducting work, if there was any that involved soil disturbance. I didn't see that. I'd like to know the status on the temporary PA permit that expired in mid-December of last year. Also that they should provide proof of the controlled inspections that were required by the PA permit, because it is a temporary. They also need to provide a copy of the DOB May 2014 approved plans showing modifications. I note that the job was professionally self-certified. So I'd like to know if we're sure that the proposed changes comply with ADA, egress, public assembly, and Appendix G requirements, because self-certification may not have ensured that those were compliant. I'd like the architect to satisfy these specific questions to the board, so by certifying to the board, perhaps he or she can take another closer look at that question. I note, for example, there's restricted egress from the women's prayer area, so maybe that's where I'm concerned about the public assembly, because the area is restricted. Do the proposed plans and those approved for the TPA aligned? They should provide the TPA sheets 1 and 2 that are referred to in the in the permit. Work permits are in place for the open items, but will need to be renewed. I'm just noting that. I'd like to know what the status of the fire alarm system installation is, and whether the building is actually sprinklered. And they really do need to provide a clearer set of PDF drawings for the final submission, because all the text needs to be legible in the electronic format and really isn't. Anybody else?
They indicated that they were going to be completing the project by January 2016, so I wanted an update on whether or not this actually has been completed. And also, could they give us a timeline for getting the permanent PA?
Yeah.
Also in their TPA, they mentioned that they have fire guards. I don't think they gave us the certification ID cards, just to make sure that they're compliant.
And then the plans show a lift and an elevator, but it looks to me that the elevator is able to be entered at grade, so I was wondering, do they really need both? The elevator's on the side of the building, the lift is at the rear. Right. And I was concerned about that they didn't discuss the required parking. In the prior grant, we had 7 on-site parking spaces and 43 off-site spaces on the adjacent lot. And I actually visited the site, and I don't even see how this area is available. And they note on their plans that no parking is required.
Oh.
So I'd like them to discuss the parking.
Item number 13, 87-12BZ, 11720-1728, Sheepshead Bay Road, Brooklyn.
Okay. We need the community board recommendation. There are a lot of open boiler violations. I'd like to know who is responsible for these, since it seems like it's a devoted use. I'd like to know what the ADA and fire safety measures were that they said were installed, and whether they're maintained, and for them to provide proof of operation and inspection. They say in the papers that they aren't changing the hours of operation, but they never tell us what the hours of operation are. So we need to know that. I'd like to also know whether there were any functional changes that occur in terms of activities in the PCE. Like, for instance, what occurs in that large open area on the first floor. And I noticed in terms of the bubbled area, I only saw one small plan change near the front entrance, and they bubbled some dimensions that don't change the layout. I just want to know if there's any other changes. Anybody else?
In the prior resolution, they mentioned some grandfathered signage. It had to do with the height of the signage, and one of the conditions was that they were going to clarify this with DOB. So I noticed that there's only one sign at the front of the building, I think, on the plans, and nothing on the sides, because this used to be a movie theater, so it had some tall signs. Just what that discussion with DOB ended in, and if they're only proposing one sign at the front, total.
And I think in one of their photos, they're showing boxes in a stairwell.
Yes.
They need to remove anything that is impeding egress.
Just continuing on the signage, based on the site visit, it seemed there weren't any other signs other than the one on the entrance.
Yeah, there's only one on the front, right?
However, I think Google Map did show that there were other signs of the prior operation. So maybe what I would like to get a clarification is if there are other signs that have been provided on the entire property related to this, is it compliant?
So it's really that we need a total sign analysis.
For this operation.
For this operation, but it's always measured against the total, right? So it should be a total building signage analysis. Okay.
Item number 14, 31312BZ, 1009 Flatbush Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay. With this one, I'd also like to know the ADA and fire safety measures that were installed and maintained, and that they provide proof of operation and inspection. There are a lot of elevator violations. Like to know where that is, and is that elevator under the control of this PCE? Again, they talk about the no change to the hours of operation without telling us what the hours are. And I'd like to know if there are any functional changes occurring in terms of activities in this PCE. Anything else?
I have the same question on the signage.
So a full signage analysis then, right?
Appeals calendar, decision items. Item number 15, 6515 BC, 6615A, 361 Central Park West, Manhattan.
And I'm going to recuse from this?
The applicant has requested that this application be withdrawn without prejudice, and we are considering.
Madam Chair, can I?
Sorry?
Excuse me.
Yes, tomorrow we will be, it'll be up for tomorrow.
Thank you.
Sorry, didn't mean to intimate that it was forever.
Those people came? Wow. To a review session?
Item number 16, 22315A, 638 Sharretts Road, Staten Island.
Okay. With this one, I would just like the fire department to check the drawing that was submitted. I actually think there's an error in the location of the note about the frontage space. And they were supposed to have a sign that said, marked in yellow on that frontage space saying fire department no standing, and I think they misunderstood what the frontage space is. It seems to be like in front of the front door as opposed to actually where it says frontage space. So I just like the fire department to quickly check the drawing and make sure the note's in the right spot.
All right, I'll check.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay.
New cases, 24415A, 677 Fifth Avenue, Manhattan.
Okay. A sign case. Okay, this case is attempting to rely, well, actually, both sides are relying on the Bravo decision that's from not very long ago, and as always, does the installation direct attention to more than itself? My questions are, I'd like to know what the use of the third and fourth floors are on which the so-called culture wall is located. I believe it's still related to retail, but it wasn't really clear to me. I'd like to have the appellant explain what the use and purpose of the culture wall is. For example, why was from a design perspective, why was the atrium space at the front of the building made quadruple in height? Obviously, for me, it seems obvious it was designed to include that wall. So I wonder then, isn't this display included within the envelope of the Microsoft store? It's not just a sort of a building design element, it seems to be a store design element, so that's different. And also, why is it being proposed for this site as opposed to any other of Microsoft's stores? How did this come up in terms of their general store design? This isn't the first Microsoft store, even though it's kind of being billed that way. There's Microsoft stores all over the country. It's just the first in New York, apparently, all over the world. I do understand that the display can't be seen from inside the building without really craning your neck and leaning up against the glass at the facade. But you might ask, why is this not decoration, as stated in the first DOB determination? I have to admit that I don't understand DOB's argument about why the wall beats the A finding, arguing something about it being a structure or being attached to a structure. I kind of got lost there. So according to DOB's logic just with respect to that little piece of A finding. A regulated sign would meet the A finding at the very least, no matter where it is in the building, since it's always mounted to a structure in a building. But I think that ZR 1210 clarifies that only illuminated signs located in a window within a building can be regulated. So we don't need to talk about whether it's mounted to a structure. And fortunately, we haven't been asked to look at what constitutes in a window. What's troubling with this particular installation for me, in spite of what the appellant says, and consistent with our decision in Bravo, and in line with DOB's argument, is that some of the imagery available about the store is what's available about the store online. The video of the store opening, a link to which DOB provided, shows this crenellated fractured digital square pattern projected on the screen in direct comparison to the quartered multicolor square logo that hangs beneath it. So you see the square with those 4 colors, and then you see this kind of fractile collection of squares, and you actually see them in direct relation when you're standing on the street. That I think that makes the exact visual reference between the 2 images that we referred to in Bravo. That you see the colored logo, you see these fractile squares, and just the way the Bravo sign was of a certain color and typeface, which you see against the Park Fast lettering, you make that direct connection. On the interior of the store, there's a cartoon image of the Statue of Liberty and the Manhattan skyline. All the images, unrelated to the Microsoft images, are somehow relevant to the shopping experience inside the store. How they make that connection exactly, subliminal, not sure, but given the nature of the Microsoft product, which includes high-resolution imagery, et cetera, I'm not sure that we can separate gorgeous views of the Manhattan skyline and the Statue of Liberty from Microsoft itself that makes possible the gorgeous views with digital technology. Perhaps that's not unlike Apple's iPhone 6 campaign that has images of just about anything that's taken with an iPhone 6. So they're clearer because it says right underneath it, iPhone 6. But you're inside the Microsoft store. Clearly the images are made possible by a Microsoft product. So for me, I think that Bravo does apply, but that this is a case that's similar to our decision in Bravo, where the images very much relate to the advertising campaign. Anything else?
Well, first, I'd like to say that just visiting the store and looking from across the street, it is pretty impressive. There's no doubt about that. But my questions go toward what the meaning of sort of the cultural wall is. And in reading a lot of materials about Microsoft and about sort of their new thrust in changing the culture of Microsoft and sort of fitting into the culture of where they are. And they talk about, showing the culture of Fifth Avenue. So to me, that does sort of signal that it's an advertisement of who they are and why you should come into the store. It's clearly trying to bring attention to the store and what the products that are sold there. They've got that new 3D virtual reality whole setup thing that's pretty impressive. And when you see the display, this wall display kind of go into its, do its thing, or it starts to make three-dimensional sort of objects and rooms, and the walls and the floors start to kind of, go up and down. It reminds me very much of that product, of what that product is sort of selling. So I have a problem with sort of separating out the imagery that is there with what is actually being sold. And if they can make that distinction, I would be happy to hear it. I also would like to hear from the building department concerning other sort of like installations that are along Fifth Avenue, and what distinguishes this from them, and if those other installations are sort of in violation, has the building department gone and enforced on those. For me, it really hinges on what this wall can do and how it relates to what's being sold. I think that there is a link, and I tend to agree with you on why that link has been established. But I think I'd like to hear more about the cultural wall.
I had a few questions for Department of Buildings. They stated that they felt that the cultural wall was assigned because it will include a decoration that's illuminated and visible from the street, and that it actually will direct viewers' attention to the subject premises regardless of what's displayed. And so I wanted to ask them, how is that different from any artwork that's affixed to any frontage or shown within any window? And why should that be regulated as if it's a sign? I also had a question concerning that if DOB was correct that these video walls were frequently used by other retailers, then why would one then associate the presence of this video wall with Microsoft instead of with any other, retailers who exhibit video wall, who show video walls like HP? And then I also had a question because the HP building has a cultural display on it that actually is on an arterial on the West Side Highway. And it's many panels, it's very large, and it's actually in existence. So I wanted to know what DOB's approach was regarding that HP wall. Did it consider it a sign? And if so, why is it actually there? Because it shouldn't be, because this is a relatively new installation. And that, to me, the HP building, I would argue that actually is not a sign because it is just a series of beautiful videos of different areas of the world, and nowhere in the video is there any mention of HP directly. There's no HP logo, there's no HP product. It's just moving images of different parts of this world, different faces, different people, different countries, that sort of thing. And that's actually what I thought that the Microsoft display was actually going to be, was, just different visuals of different places in the world and different, I don't know, wonders of the world and that kind of thing. And I actually thought that what's there now, because I did a site visit, which is kind of this geometric pattern, was actually probably like a holding kind of pattern for the screen until maybe this gets decided one way or another. I don't know.
But it's a stationary pattern right now.
It is.
Right?
It's a stationary pattern.
No, it moves.
Well, I mean, it's
moves in and
well,
out, and it becomes a room. And
see, I didn't see that when I passed, and maybe it was because the store was closed, because it was early in the morning. It was just kind of like a silver and gray geometric pattern.
Now we
the
were
whole
transfixed.
thing.
My husband and I stood there for about 15 minutes going, whoa. It was very,
It has very good three-dimensional
yeah.
illusion. It's very nice, actually. I like
Beautiful.
it.
It is.
But I was concerned of whether or not it used Microsoft products, if it was actually an advertisement for Microsoft software or, screens or something. So, and I was just wondering, similar to the HP display, what if it just showed photographs, which changed like every 30 seconds, instead of even more rapidly? Just, if it just had changing photographs, what would their opinion be of that?
But so then what do you do about what goes on inside the store?
Well, I didn't really see, when I went into the store, the screens along the walls were not similar to the culture wall. They were a lot more colorful, and they were a lot more informative about specific products. So I didn't really think there was a direct correlation at this time.
Yeah, I didn't see that either.
Yeah, I think the display wall that's on the ground, on the lower floors, in the shopping area at least, were similar to the other display walls that Microsoft has on their service and the product area, which is totally different from what's on the third floor. What's interesting is that particular object is only visible if you're directly across from the street. If you're standing right in front of the store, that object does not have that same three-dimensional aspect, or doesn't have that same wow factor as one would be as one is directly opposite to it. Which leads me to the question of, is it really drawing attention? Because you have to be located at a specific location to be able to have the effect of it. Whereas a lot of other displays that are along Fifth Avenue, I mean, they're visible from very far away. It draws attention from very, very far away. And if that's the intent of it, I don't think this particular object attains that. It is very...
You have to be really
you really have to be in front of it to get the full effect of it.
In front of it and across the street.
Across the street.
Not even underneath it.
Yeah, not even underneath it. Right. Even if you're
Yeah.
standing in that atrium space, you have no idea what's happening about on that. And I think I agree with Commissioner Henson, is that there's so many signage along that Fifth Avenue corridor, and I at least felt many of them seem to be in not meeting the sign regulation and the way DOB has questioned the signage here, and I think many of them are in violation. And it begs the question of what really is a decorative wall versus an art wall versus a signage, and there's so many creative solutions. I can see a wall that is going to be constantly in motion. You could very soon have a technology, a facade technology, where the facade could be constantly in 3D motion, moving around. That can draw attention, and it has nothing to do with the object that is being sold within that property, and that can draw attention, but it's a facade. So is that a sign in that case, or is that just a part of a facade that moves with the sun's angle or for anything?
Right, this already exists.
So, yes, so at what point do we draw the line and say, this is a sign? And that goes to the question of the nexus part of it. Like, how is this, in my mind, what is the nexus between this and particular cultural wall and what is being, and the product there? There are many softwares out there, there are many programs out there. It could, does that. And so many other companies could be using the Microsoft product to have a display. Is that then saying it is an advertisement for the Microsoft product that's further down on Fifth Avenue and 57th Street? No.
Because you can't make the link, because it's too remote. Using technology isn't an automatic link to advertise technology.
So then should this product be penalized because it is using a technology that is known to it to display a work of art, a cultural wall?
But it's going to depend on what that display is. If that display becomes sort of a branding tool.
I agree.
If even the movement part of it becomes kind of the brand of Microsoft. They've got a similar building in Sydney, Australia. They don't have the cultural wall, but they do have additional sort of panels that one, can see actual product. They actually put up product. So, the question is that eventually, does the cultural wall become this kind of iconic, structure for Microsoft? And if that's the case, then it is a branding tool. So I think we need to speak to that a little bit.
Right. And for me, the biggest link was that opening video that we saw, where they were using those squares when the staff is standing in front of it, and they're using the squares, and the square of the logo is right there. And when you stand opposite it, the logo is actually perfectly placed underneath the image, so that you don't need the logo to be on the image. You see it with the image automatically because of the compression in perspective. So when the image is making direct reference to the logo, it seems to be clearer that that's a continuation of the logo. So that's the problem about these digital walls, where you can do just about anything.
And if that logo is removed, then how would DOB interpret that?
Other question. Yeah. Then the direct connection visually between the logo and what's on display is more attenuated. Anybody else? Okay.
Item number 18, 26215A, 64 Sharon Road, Staten Island.
Other than meeting the fire department, I didn't have any issues with this.
I did. Sorry. On Penton Avenue, according to the pavement plan, there's 3 new street trees, or actually 4 new street trees. One of them they have to take down to put in a curb cut. But they're removing all the street trees and they're causing a jog in the sidewalk.
Yeah, why is it
So it was like, why can't they have the sidewalk line up with the other residential homes and keep the lovely street trees?
I had exactly that same question.
Oh, good, thank you.
I saw that jog and wondered why.
Why, yes.
Yep.
Item number 19, 2016 1222A through 2016 4120A, various sites in Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island. This is the Mayor's Office of Housing Recovery. Build it back, waivers of GCL 35.
Yep. So there are, I won't go through them, but they would be in our conditions. There are many, there's 2,899 properties that are being affected by this decision, which is impressive, to enable these properties to get their building permits, where many of them already exist in the bed of map streets. Some will be slightly relocated on their properties, which may push them more into for the first time the bed of map streets. Fire department, DOT and DEP all imposed conditions, which I won't read, but they will be, and it depends on whether the street is within a capital improvement plan, not in a capital improvement plan, whether there's actually something that's been designed, or whether there hasn't been anything designed. So it's a fairly complicated set of criteria that we'll include in the resolution. Okay. But other than that, any questions?
Okay, nope. Just FYI, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, 3 of those cases are being withdrawn.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll read those tomorrow?
Yeah. And I think it was mentioned this case will be heard first?
Yeah.
First. From the calendar, it will start at 10 o'clock. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Copy that. Zoning calendar, decision items, item number 20, 60-14BZ, 14141 72nd Avenue, Queens.
Sorry, getting there. Okay. I note the temporary gate was relocated to allow safer egress to the rear yard. I'm actually not persuaded ever that the furniture in the multipurpose room will be moved every single day to accommodate classrooms, but it will, no matter what they do with the furniture, it will be absolutely forbidden that children and adults who are not either school staff or parents dropping children off for school occupy the building simultaneously. Other changes that were requested to the plans were made, but now there is a 3-foot wide egress door swinging into a 5-foot wide corridor against the direction of egress, and I don't believe that's legal. That needs to be corrected. The STC note on the windows, we had wanted the windows to have an STC rating so that the noise of children inside wouldn't disturb neighbors. Would not ensure that, because the transmission range was from 18 to like 32, and an 18 STC rating is actually single pane glass. So the answer to that is absolutely no. The STC rating note needs to be changed to state that all windows shall have an STC rating of 37. And then just in general, tomorrow I'll read a long list of conditions that we talked about last week when the neighbors were here. Anybody else?
Continued hearing items, item number 21, 30-12BZ, 14241 Roosevelt Avenue, Queens.
So this is kind of for me, the reason why you need to bring your architects and engineers to a hearing so that they hear the instruction and not so the lawyer hears the instruction and the lawyer then tries to communicate it to the architect who misunderstands the lawyer's instruction. It's very inefficient. It's a waste of everybody's time. We were really specific at the last hearing. And if you listened actually to the video, that is what the applicant committed to do, that the planting buffer was supposed to go the entire way around the parking deck that faces the residential areas, and that we discussed specifically sliding the ramp position to accommodate this. It's not built yet, so they could obviously do this. Also, we stated that the CMU wall has to be finished appropriately since the neighbors will stare right into it. Instead, I see a note for a green wall panel along the perimeter on the interior. Green walls, unless you live in Paris, are impossible to maintain. They die within months. In New York, I've never seen a green wall that's lasted for longer than a few months. And especially, but it's just true generally, when they're enveloped in motor fumes. So that's not the discussion that's not the solution that we discussed, so it's unacceptable for me. We also asked for an operational plan, which they provide a little bit of, which would include security schedule and maintenance. We also asked for a lighting plan that showed the lumen spread, which they did not provide. They provide a little bit of information about how lights have lumens. We actually know that. But actually, you need to show that by the time the light is at the edge of the parking garage, it's stepped down to 0. That's the point of those lighting plans. You were also the applicant was also supposed to indicate where the details are taken on the drawings and provide details through each parapet wall and sound wall type and show lighting poles in the building sections. These were things, if the applicant had simply listened to the video, they would have had a list. There was also supposed to be a sign indicating tow zone on the roof. I see there is a sign at the entrance, but I'm not sure that that's effective when you're on the roof. You're on the roof. We also asked the applicant to give information, and the applicant agreed to do it, about fume buildup on the roof when a roof is surrounded by high walls. With respect to exhaust cleaning systems, we were provided with the same engineer's letter that we got from back in July, so there wasn't any update on that. Let's see. And then just to pick up, because I listened to the video and then heard the testimony of one of the neighbors who went through a number of requests, and one of them seemed to be very reasonable, which was to use an asphalt base sealant instead of a tar base sealant when they build the roof. Okay. Anybody else? Okay.
Item number 22, 231 14BZ, 124 West 23rd Street, Manhattan.
On Orange Theory. Oh, okay, so they did. Okay. So in the ongoing saga of Orange Theory Fitness, they have been conducting tests. In February, they did some tests on small samples, and the parties on both sides thought that they may have found a solution based on that. So they apparently installed based on those samples, and then I just hear that they just did some tests, so we can find out what the results of it are. But the end game is both sides have to agree that the installation cures the sound problems. We don't have any work to do here until they do that. So if they agree tomorrow that it cured the sound problems, then we can move forward. If they didn't agree, they have to keep working at it. Okay.
Item number 23, 318 14BZ, 1672, 1680, 86th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, with this one, the applicant went back and looked at some of the improvements that were installed and that we requested that they installed, and they submitted a statement stating that more improvements will be done. From my perspective, given how long it took for the owner to return to the board, 18 years, and the fact that a neighbor complained about the unsightly conditions on the site, and the fact that it's February and it's going to be 70 degrees on Wednesday, I'm inclined to continue to request that the improvements be made now prior to our vote. That way, we get the site up to some reasonable speed, and then hopefully it won't be 18 years before they come back for their renewal in the future. So that's my preference. I don't know if everybody else agrees.
But I do think what they're planning to do now is good.
Yes, I think it's good, yeah. So it will bring it up to a good, reasonable, presentable style or something, fashion. Okay.
Item number 24, 7115 BZ, 548 West 22nd Street, Manhattan.
Okay, sorry. Also, this means I have a lot of notes on this. Okay, they proposed, among others, a lesser variance 5 that limits the waiver to allow an R use in the M district. I note that with the shifting of the tower to the west, as we requested, only 14,500 zoning square feet are located in the M1 of the total 61,800 square foot building, 10,400 square feet of which is residential floor area in the M1, with approximately 522 square feet of residential floor area per floor in the tower portion. There's a bigger portion in the base. So now we have a 20-story, 257-foot high tower, 10 feet of which sits in the M1. Even though it's not the full 10 feet all the way, it's actually cut back according to the way the rooftop last 3 floors are formed. The section 98-423A imposes height limitations on all buildings located within the special West Chelsea district outside of the sub-areas. So in this case, the maximum height is 135 feet with a minimum base height of 50 feet and a maximum base height of 95 feet. And this project has a base height of 59 feet, so complies with that. And a setback of at least 15 feet is required. However, at elevation 217, with the setback at the top 3 floors of the tower, the floor plate in the M1 is reduced to 10 by 26 from 10 by 54 on the lower floors. So we need to waive the maximum height within the M1-5 just for that portion of the tower that sits within the M1, just because it's taller than the maximum of 135 feet. One question I do have about the tower design is, well, I actually have 2. One's sort of a design question, which is that really the final solution proposed for having this sort of L-shaped top 3 floors? I always thought that the purpose of the sort of that rooftop reduction in mass was to create a more designed top. And so this is just kind of a dumb L all the way up. Not sure that that's how it would finally end up. But the other is, why does the bulkhead have to be 33 feet high? It's an extremely high bulkhead, and I don't understand why. They did provide a comparative analysis of other soft split lots in the area. 3 of these are similar to the subject site. Actually, before I go there, I just want to also talk about, we also have the issue of, let's see, which I'd like the applicant to address. The floor area that's being located on the seaside right? So there's a 5 FAR allowable on the M side for manufacturing or for commercial use. And though the total floor area on the site being proposed is 61,800 square feet, which is equal to 5 FAR in the M side plus 5 FAR in the C side plus 2.5 FAR on the C side for inclusionary and highline. The arrangement of that floor area has moved mostly to the C side. So that's effectively us allowing the transfer of the floor area from one side to the other, or to ignore the district boundary. Another way to look at it, which I prefer not to look at it, is an increase in the C floor area and a decrease in the M floor area. But I'd say that more accurately, it's just allowing the floor area to be located anywhere on the zoning lot without regard to district boundaries. So that's something we would need to include in any approval. Okay, so but going back, they did provide a comparative analysis of other soft split lot sites in the area. 3 of these are similar to the subject site. Block 696, Lot 1 has 50% of its 21,000 square foot lot in the M and C districts with an existing 1.5-story building. And Block 692, Lots 57 and 11 are 9,200 square feet equally split with a 1.5-story existing building and a 24,000 square foot new building. No information was given about the new building that was constructed on Lot 11. I would like to have that. The argument in this case is that the subject building has greater support dependence impact on the adjoining properties than would a 1-story building. Also, Muser Rutledge supplied soil reports about the adjacent property at 551 West 21 to establish that boulder-laden fill is local to the project site and its neighbor, apparently due to an historic pier at the location. Reports of other properties on West 23rd, 24th, 2 sites on 25th, 3 West Side Highway locations were also included that indicate these sites are boulder-free or with limited boulder occurrences. User also provided additional information about the subject building's settlement and the dependence of the adjoining building to the west on it for support. So the applicant also submitted materials in support of their argument that difficult conditions at a site in the aggregate can meet the A finding. I don't think we need to go there with this sort of just difficult conditions. I think we can stay with what is a standard A finding, which is unique physical conditions. I'd say that based on the materials that I reviewed, I think the incidence of boulders on the lot appear to be unique in the district, except for the immediate neighbor, as is because of the pier. As is the incidence on the soft sites in the area of adjoining existing buildings that are of similar height to the subject and upon which their neighbors depend for support. So there isn't anything else like that on the soft sites. These 2 unique factors, in addition to other factors that make it a costly project, cause the financial hardship which alleviation from the split lot regulations ameliorate. So I don't think you just collect a bunch of sort of standard problems and put them together. Instead, we have at least 2 unique problems, I believe. But then, just to speak briefly to the financials, which at least they were more or less responsive to our questions. The financials argue against additional 3-bedroom units in this building, but I don't really understand that, given that the Norman Foster building, still under construction, has 3-bedroom units. And I went on to the Norman Foster website, building website, where you can actually go shopping if you're so inclined, and they have all the floor plans, and there are a lot of 3-bedrooms. And I actually don't know what percentage of the total 44 units are 3-bedrooms, but clearly there are 3 bedrooms. It's still under construction. If 3 bedrooms were sort of on the out, you would think they'd be making some changes to the plans as they build. The financials are showing these units sell for $500 more per square foot than the 2 bedrooms. So it seems to me that if you wanted to make for a better income producer, you would opt for more 3 bedrooms. And then it talks about, the financials also talk about a longer sales wait, which isn't much longer. But they have river views, and so I would say, wouldn't that be worth the wait? I mean, for the $500 a square foot? And then I had another question about the 551 comps. They were discounted for a location. I didn't understand why they would be discounted for a location. They're next door to each other. The view is the view. There's the river. Not everybody has also in 551, not every apartment has a clear view of the river. Some, in fact, are going to be blocked by this building. So, which, by the way, shoppers know about. So they bid accordingly, right? I did understand the discounts for time, size, and amenities. And I note also with respect to parking, they got a CPC special permit for the parking, which is a totally different set of findings than a variance. They also, the financials did finally, at our request, provide research on the value of the parking spaces at $350 per space, and included space sales in the as of right and in the lower variance option, in both lesser variance options. I do note that unlike another application that we have way uptown, these were priced at less than the parking spaces for way uptown, which makes no sense to me whatsoever. If anything, they're closer to comparable. Those were my comments. Next.
Well, I actually agree with the comments that you made regarding the financials. In fact, it's my opinion that the site value has been estimated as being too high and the income has been underestimated for the as-of-right project and also for the lesser variance projects. I agree like you do that the Corcoran report that they gave as justification for why they would not have 3-bedroom apartments in the lesser variance, or as many 3-bedroom apartments, is not very telling. I think that what they're stating here, they're basing it on one portion of the report that basically says that from the 3rd quarter of 2015 to the 4th quarter of 2015, there was actually a decrease in sales price per square foot for the larger apartments. However, it's not really telling the full picture. If you look at the rest of that page, it talks about between the 4th quarter of 2014 and the 4th quarter of 2015, there's actually a doubling in sales price per square foot for the larger apartments. And I feel that that's a more telling statistic, because from 3rd quarter to 4th quarter in a year, it's not a long enough time period to establish a trend, and that tends to also be the time of year where things start to ramp down in terms of apartment sales as the cool weather sets in, school is in session, as well as holidays are coming. People are less likely to make purchases on apartments at that period of time. So I wouldn't really rely on that statement as justification for not including the larger apartments. I agree with you. The larger apartments get about $500 a square foot more per square foot. And so you would be maximizing the income on each floor plate if you had one larger apartment versus 2 smaller ones. I don't find the argument regarding the adjustment of the Riverview building comparables, the 21st Street building and also the building on, I guess, 11th Avenue to the north. I'm not in agreement on the way in which they've adjusted the value down for location, because to me, these are going to be marketed as if they're Riverview condominiums. It really doesn't make a difference who actually signed the contract with the HP building, because both buildings are going to benefit from that, because the HP building is not going to be taller. So that's like a 20% locational adjustment that takes $600 a square foot off of the sales price of all of those comparables. And so that really is putting a downward pressure on those sales prices that's limiting the return. I also had questions about the parking sales, just like you did. The comparables say that they sell for $500,000 a square foot. However, the report is making an adjustment downward because they're stating that this is going to be valet parking, and so that there's expense to providing that parking. However, one of the comparables at $500,000 a space is actually parking located on an upper floor that needs an elevator to get to it, that is stated as not being valet parking. So I don't understand why this parking has to be valet parking. And if it does have to be valet parking, which I'm not convinced it does, there's really no breakdown in the cost for all of these expenses that are deducted out to make it $350,000 a square foot instead of $500,000 a square foot. So the effect of those different issues bring down the sales price of each apartment, which then brings down the income that this project could generate. So it makes it look as if an as-of-right is not going to be profitable. And I've also still have questions with the site value and the valuation of the existing building in terms of the effective age versus the real age. The effective age listed here is 74, the real age is 94. I think that the building should be valued using a 94-year-old building. This building is on a very weak foundation, which is part of the A finding, and so therefore it really can't be ignored here. The building is not being used for its initial intended manufacturing use, and I think because of its compromised foundation, probably cannot be used in a manufacturing use. So therefore, it does have a functional obsolescence to it. And I think that all of that results in a building that is effective age is most like its real age. This has an effect on the site value because it actually lowers the remaining building value, which then lowers the overall site value, which enables you to get a higher return with less building area. And so for those reasons, I'm not convinced that this project has met the B finding.
Anybody else?
Just going back to the A finding, I found the Muser memos helpful. They did change their statements in some ways regarding the West 21st Street building, but the way I see this is an as-of-right building in the commercial district moved over 10 feet to allay some of the problems of building close to the HP building, and I think it's a prudent move.
To move it closer to the HP?
No, to move it 10 feet away.
Oh, okay.
I think the lesser variance that's been provided is in the right direction. I think of all the arguments that have been provided with regards to other similar sites, site conditions, I think it has helped me in better understanding them having the A findings. I think there could be a little bit of cleaning up, but I think it's in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Like what kind of cleaning up?
I think just some of the questions that Commissioner Otley-Brown is, I would like a little bit of clarification on that, but I think this is, in my mind, it's in the right direction.
No, I would agree with Commissioner Chanda that lesser variance 5 for me is very close. I agree with Commissioner Otley-Brown that there are some sort of outstanding issues that need clarification and probably review. But I would say that lesser variance 5 was close to what I would consider as appropriate. Okay, thank you.
New cases, item number 1, 12615 BZ, 1782 East 27th Street, Brooklyn.
Yes. Okay, I think that from a threshold point of view, the DOB objections are incomplete. They only request a floor area increase, but the rear yard extension is clearly illegal. And I don't know what the applicant said to a DOB that would lead them to think that it's not illegal. And the proposal is to reduce the rear yard to 21 foot 5 inches and the lot coverage to .4 and to extend the non-complying side yards. I actually don't know what the existing lot coverage would be without the rear yard extension, so that should be provided. I'd like to know whether the porch is a permitted obstruction in the 9 foot 6 non-complying front yard. I don't see that little porch as existing on the Sanborn, but I do believe that that extension existed on the Sanborn, though they probably were all built as porches and then everyone closed them in. I note that all of the properties surrounding the house have larger than complying rear yards. 4 houses on the social block have floor area ratios between 0.86 and 1, so it's not really a predominant characteristic of what's being requested. We need a submission with PDFs with all the text legible. For instance, the key on the drawings is illegible, so I can't tell which walls are to remain, which to be removed, and which are new. The cellar shows a 3-piece bath, which is not permitted. I note the community board, with respect to that, had a note that said, approved on condition that the building not be used as a synagogue. So I find that rather telling. So our eyes and ears are open because we have seen these illegal conversions. I note that this is an 8-bedroom house with a 2-story extension at the rear, surrounded by houses with complying rear yards. The house has many sinks on the first floor, 3 more than its 2 first-floor powder rooms require. That seems to lend itself to some of that fear that the community board might have expressed, unless this is Le Corbusier designing the Villa Savoy all over again, which has a sink in like every corridor. For a dentist, that's who will know.
There's a terrible joke in there, I just can't.
There are also 6 bathrooms. The house is very massive for the neighborhood and nearly 10 feet higher than it currently is, with a 12-foot, 10-inch high attic that could easily be reduced in height. The elevation that is shown with the adjacent properties on either side make clear to me how much the house towers over its neighbors. I think the building needs a serious redesign using a complying side yard expansion to the south and a 1-story extension at the rear, just to get started. Anybody else?
Well, it looks to me, I looked at the Sanborns and I didn't see this illegal construction in the 2007 Sanborn. So I was wondering when it was actually constructed. They said it was 20 years ago, but, you know, it was built without permits. They're trying to keep the side yard of that illegal construction and continue it, which I think is completely wrong. They're trying to keep those foundations, which I think they should just be completely demolished.
Right.
When they give their FAR and rear yard studies, it's nice for them to tell us how many buildings are in the sample, so you can like determine what the frequency is, instead of saying we've got 3 of this. You know, you have to know what the total pool is.
Yeah,
you know?
right.
I couldn't tell from the stippling what was existing and versus what was proposed. It wasn't a very good contrast. They're calculating some of their front yard landscaping using the portion that's beyond their property line in the front. And, well, they should explain why the community board is concerned about synagogue use. And the site already has a street tree and a planting strip, which must be maintained, and they should show that on the site plan.
Did they give a legal conditions plan and survey so we could get a good, you know, ground zero kind of perspective to see whether everything else is, you know, if they're keeping the right amount of everything?
Right. So
As a
legal
threshold,
condition. Yeah.
rather.
Well, they're claiming that everything's a legal condition. So. Okay. Anybody else? No?
Item number 2, 17715BZ, 4032 Alborn Avenue, Staten Island.
Okay. This one, the statement of fact states that the site has a DEC freshwater wetland adjacent area permit for a one-family detached, when the proposal is for 2 families. So I'd like to know whether the amended materials have been submitted to DEC. Statement of facts has an error in the minimum lot size dimension. It should be 3,800 square feet as stated in the statement of findings. The statement of findings and the BSA zoning calculation sheet don't make clear the zoning resolution section from which the parking location waiver is being requested. That would be 25,622. I'd like to know whether the Richmond, what is it called? The Special South Richmond District regulations modify 25,622 that applies to the lower density growth management areas. Also, the statement of facts doesn't match the as-of-right drawing with respect to the depth of the required front yards, 10 feet versus 18 feet. And I'm not seeing where an 18-foot front yard is required in an R3X. Section 107-461 sends you to 2345A and B. And R3Xs need 10-foot front yards unless the yard adjacent is deeper, as here, in which case it has to be 20 feet. So I think all the sections aren't cited properly, and therefore the answers are wrong. I'm also not understanding the as-of-right 20-foot side yard in the R3X. Section 107-462 states that a detached three-story building and a basement is a story needs 2 side yards for a total of 20 feet with a minimum width of 8 feet. So the drawing is showing this teeny little sliver that can be built as of right, which isn't correct. It could be a larger something, not a lot larger, but it could be a larger something. And then this is a question just about the design. I'm sort of not understanding why the proposed design is such a tiny house with a 10-foot front yard along Lenovar, which is an untraveled, unopened, designated open space that cannot be improved. So why wouldn't you want to have a wider house on that site? You basically have forever green adjacent to you. Also, the elevations don't seem to be showing legal windows in the basement apartment. That unit is also labeled open basement, so then I get concerned, but I didn't find that when I went online. Is the building in a flood zone or otherwise regulated as the ground floor use? So those are my comments.
I had a question about the deck that faces Uncas, I guess it is, Uncas Avenue.
Ooh.
Yeah, right. If that were enclosed,
If what?
If that were enclosed, the deck, below the deck, if that were enclosed, could that be used as a garage? And then they don't need this? They don't need their waiver for having a third parking space that sits?
From Uncas, yeah. Because they could also.
It looks as if you could indeed make that a garage, take the staircase that leads up to the top deck, put that around on the side, and access the top deck from there. Then you have room for a garage. Yeah. You don't have an issue.
Well, my concern was with the studio apartment. Providing a studio apartment creates the need for another parking space,
Right.
which creates a waiver.
Right.
So,
Do they need the
it also is much less than 608 square feet. It's more in line with 300 plus square feet. It's not a very large studio apartment. I would like to see a streetscape. Actually, if you go to the rear, it's part of a blue belt and a DEC property, and there's a whole planting area which would be disrupted to put in a curb cut at the rear of the house. And I just question the need for that.
Anybody else? Did you want to add something? Yeah.
Just to update on the wetlands permit, they have applied for the modification, but as of last week, they haven't received the final approval, and they're going to update you tomorrow.
Okay.
Item number 3, ready? Item number 3, 25315 BZ, 997 East 32nd Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, they provided a step-by-step analysis, the architect did, of how the house was being retained, but when I'm reading it and I'm trying to visualize the step-by-step, it sounds like when we're done, there won't be any stick left, maybe a couple of joists left, but otherwise it's being dismantled piece by piece, and just because any, sorry?
Joists have been replaced.
Even the joists are replaced.
The joists have been replaced.
Okay, so when we're done, there isn't anything. If you were to put an X on all the existing parts, there wouldn't be any X's left by the time you're done, so that sounds like demolition.
It's a new building.
Yeah, so that's not allowed. That invalidates the permit, so back to the drawing board about that part of the concept. I note that, interestingly, on this block, most houses surrounding have shallow rear yards, really shallow, ranging from 0, the immediate neighbor is completely illegal, obviously, but it looks like it's been there for about 20 years. So from 0 to 19, 20, 24, 25 feet, so the proposal really isn't imposing anything on the neighbors that is not already characteristic. This is really the case on this block, and this immediate block. What I would like to know is whether those rear yard incursions are 1 or 2 stories. So the one that is totally illegal, that fills up its entire site, is 1 story. I just don't know about the others. With respect to the front elevation, I'd just like to understand why one side is higher at the dormer level and whether than the other, and whether the dormer heights can be brought down to read less massively along the front portion, because these are all kind of compact little houses all in a row, and so just to keep the apparent mass of the addition reduced, the dormers don't need to be quite as lofty, sort of. That was my only. Yeah.
Yesterday when I was in the field, the roof is not there.
Oops. They started construction, in other words.
Yes, the construction has started. The floor joist for ground floor and the second floor is new.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, they're.
So I just want to get a clarification of what's the current status. How that affects our decision.
If they've done what they planned and everything's new, we don't have an existing house anymore. And is this being done pursuant to permit?
Right. I was there last week, and I didn't see any beginning of construction.
I have a photo.
Yeah, they're.
Okay.
We should check to see if they've pulled a permit for any
You
work.
know, I did see something stuck on the wall, but it was too high for me to see. I'm a short person, so I couldn't see anything.
It's supposed to be at eye level.
Yeah, there was something on the window, in the front window wall, there was a sign. I couldn't
We can
read
find
it.
that easily by looking
The
up.
DOB.
Yeah, I can't get online.
So I would have to say that if construction has occurred and it's following the step-by-step process, then we would need proof in order to go forward that they haven't basically rebuilt the house. Or let's say demolished the house.
They should stop working now.
Rebuilding is a different subject, but if they demolish the house, that's another. Okay. Eek, never do that. Okay, that's
Done?
Yes.
This concludes the March 7th public review session for 2016.
Thank you all.
That's not what it looked like to me. No, that's not the same house. This is the front of the house?
Yep, this is the front of the house.
That's not the house I saw.
I don't recall noticing